I guess since it's 7 o'clock, I will get started. Let me make sure we have most of our panelists ready to go. Okay. All right, well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. It is a large crowd that is joining us on Zoom and on YouTube. A much larger response than we ever expected. A couple of housekeeping items. First, in case you didn't hear before, we are being recorded and live streamed to YouTube. Second, the chat is open in Zoom and will be moderated to the extent possible. We have a lot to get through tonight, and we are hoping to have time in the end to be able to answer a few questions. So we will have a moderator keep an eye out for some questions to ask. But as I said, it's a lot. In an hour and a half, you'll see. And the third item is that if you are in need of sign language services, we have two wonderful sign language interpreters, Lane Peters and Caitlin Mathis. And if you are able to from your computer, we suggest pinning them when they are signing and using a 50-50 split screen so that you can adjust the size of the speakers versus the presentation. And I think we are ready to go. I believe we have all of our panelists here. Thank you everybody for joining. So welcome. My name is Allison Castles, and I am co-president of Arlington Special Education PTA along with Kathleen Clark. For those who are not familiar, the Special Education PTA, or as we refer to it as SEPTA, is here to provide a community voice and advocate for Arlington special education students and their families. And that applies to the whole county. We don't just represent one school, we represent all students in Arlington County. And we're also here to support APS teachers and administration to help achieve the best outcomes for our students. Along with me and Kathleen, we have Nadia Facey and Christina Camacho Yacabuchi, who will be moderating the chat. Christina is our Espacio Hispano coordinator, so she can translate any comments that come in on Spanish. And we also have from the Parent Resource Center, Kathleen Donovan and Kelly Mountain, who will speak a little later, in addition to those that we've already listed from APS. And on the APS side, I think I will hand it over to Dr. Durán to start it off.
Thank you and good evening. I appreciate the welcome, and I'm looking forward to participating this evening and also to developing a close partnership with SEPTA as we move forward, in my administration and moving forward as partners. It's really important. So thank you very much for inviting me. Right now is a very difficult time for all of us as we're trying to figure out how we're going to best meet the needs of all students in our virtual learning. I tell people, and many of you have probably heard me say this, making the decision to go all virtual was not a difficult one because it is the safest thing to do. But what's difficult about that decision and what's difficult about moving forward is that it's not necessarily the most effective way of providing instruction for all students. Many of our students with disabilities in particular, need a different way to be supported in the virtual learning model, and it's not going to effectively meet necessarily everyone the same way. And so That's the difficult part of this, is how do we find a way to think outside the box, to work differently, and to provide the supports needed. I want to, as I've said a few times publicly, and I want to commit here to SEPTA, that as we work to transition to phase in back in person, and we're working on that, and we will continue to monitor the metrics, which we can talk about later, students with disabilities are the first group and will be the first group we return back in person to services and with all their teachers and their assistants. We're also looking at, even prior to that, thinking about bringing everyone back for instruction. We're going to prioritize even further within students with disabilities those students who require one-on-one support to access distance learning in a physical location. And so we've been working right now with a large task force that has been dedicated to reopening schools. That task force ends on August 31st. And right after that, we're going to be developing a work group with parent representation from SEPTA, our ASAC, other parents, and our principals, with the goal of how do we safely return our first group of students with disabilities? How do we work on that first? So that is going to be our next major digging in as a group to figure that out. I want everyone on this meeting to know, and our parents to know, that I am committed to working with each and every one of you. I know that maybe in the past you may not have had the best experiences with APS. I have spoken to some of you who may be on this call already. And I know that we need to do better for your students. One thing I've learned about APS, and I'm proud to be part of APS, is all of the great things that happen here. And we're an award-winning school system. And I know many of you are proud to be parents as well of APS. But as we celebrate our successes and as we begin to work on how we can be even greater, we have to understand that those successes aren't always felt by everyone in the same way. And so I want to work with you, alongside you, to understand how we can create successes for each and every one of you and your children, because that is my goal. I talk about equity, meeting the needs of every student by name and by need. And that truly includes students with disabilities, looking at their individual needs. It's not something that we have always thought about when we, and particularly in APS and in other parts of educational community, when we talk about equity, we sometimes want to talk about it solely about race, and race is a component. But we also need to make sure we're talking about equity the way I just did. It's meeting everyone's need. And that's what I hope to do and work with all of you. And I'm excited to be here. I look forward to it. Myself, I have a sister with autism, and I experienced growing, and she's almost 30 years old. So much younger a sister than I, and I experienced and know what it was like to have her excluded time and time again, to be not a part of learning, to actually be told that she couldn't even come to school because of her behavior, when all she needed was a different way of having some time for her to pause. She's someone that could not stay focused longer than probably 20, 30 minutes, and then needed a pause. And then she got that, she was able to learn. But because she was not able to sit and learn in the same way, she was asked to go home many times, and we had to take her home. So I understand personally the impact that that has. I also know that as we move to distance learning, where we have a synchronous model now, and we're going from one extreme to another, where we had in the springtime, not everyone was taking attendance, we didn't have a structured day that everyone followed. Well, was it new content? Well, now we're moving to new content. We're moving to a structured day. We're moving to live synchronous instruction. But as a part of that, we're also understanding that there are many students like my sister who cannot follow that strict, tight schedule in the same way. So how do we provide opportunities to have teachers record those lessons so that they can be watched later, that can be watched in chunks for those students that might need that opportunity? So that's one solution we're working on, but I hope to learn and listen more solutions. And I ask everyone that share with me. I want to learn. I want to understand. Only been here 2 months. It seems like 2 years, but I'm learning as we go, and I'm here to listen, and I'm here to roll up my sleeves and partner with you to build back the trust that many of you may have lost in us, and or the confidence maybe that you've lost in us, and also the successes that we've had. I want to celebrate those with you, but I'm so fortunate to be joined with a great team. Ms. Loft, Dr. Rothenbuescher, Ms. Krug, They have been phenomenal, and they really are new in their roles like me. They're just a little bit more veteran than I am in their role, but we're all new in this work. And so we're a team that's committed to working with you. And I want you to know that. And I also want you to know that I make sure that each and every day when I get up in the morning, that I'm doing everything I can to help our students. And if I don't know something that's going on, please let us know how we can help your students. We have to not just say that equity is a part of our work, we have to practice it. One thing I shared with our leadership conference last week and with our new teachers, equity sometimes talked about an equity lens. Let's have an equity lens so we understand all of our students' needs. And I challenge them, and I'm challenged all of us to take off that concept, because a lens is something you can remove, like my glasses. I can take off my lens. But I want us to work on an equity mindset where we actually change our practices and our thinking, and not just have a lens to look at it for the moment, and then when we don't want to take it off. So that is something that I pledge to work with all of you. And again, I thank you for welcoming me. Invite me back to any opportunity to listen and learn, and I will be there.
Thanks, Dr. Durán. Well said. You eloquently said everything that Heather and I would like to say to this group. We are so grateful to Allison and Kathleen and all of SEPTA for having us here tonight to collaborate with our community, to answer to the best that we can the many questions that our families have, the wonders, the thoughts, the anxieties that all of us as parents are thinking about right now for our students. And Heather and I are really trying to look at this as an opportunity to be innovative and creative and think of new ways to support our students in ways that we would have not thought of before. But these are new opportunities for us to problem solve. And just to echo Dr. Durán's sentiments, we know that some families may not have had the most positive experience within the special education process. And moving forward, Heather and I are very open to hearing those stories and working together to move forward so that we are transparent with our families, that we have a community of trust, and that we can really work together to support the needs of all of our students. So with that, I will push us forward to Heather Rothenbuescher, who will open us up with a little mindset, and then we'll move into the agenda for tonight.
Thanks, Kelly, and thanks, SEPTA, for putting this evening together. We're so grateful to have the opportunity to connect with our community. And just a quick correction, Dr. Durán introduced me as Dr. Rothenbuescher and Kelly as Ms. Krug. It's actually Dr. Krug and Ms. Rothenbuescher.
My apologies, Dr. Krug.
It's fine.
But I did want to start with a quote, and this one says, "Inclusion is not a strategy to help fit people into systems and structures which exist in our societies. It's about transforming those systems and structures to make them better for everyone." And this is really an illustration of the vision that we have for a student-centered approach to individualized services and supports to meet the unique needs of all of our students, not just now in this virtual environment, but as we move forward and continue our work in the Office of Special Education in the broader APS community. So this is really the mindset that we are trying to bring to everyone that we work with, to our teachers, our staff, our schools, and our families. So I just wanted to start us off on that note, knowing that this is where we are right now, and this is our goal and our vision as we move forward.
Okay, thanks, Heather. We received over 500 questions regarding return to school in the last 4 weeks. And I want to be transparent with the process we used to get here with the questions that we're asking tonight. While reviewing all of these questions, we noted many of the same themes that parents are concerned about. They want to know about their child's IEP and 504 considerations, what's happening now that we're going virtual. Many of our kids need the structure and supports available in school. They want to know when kids can return to school in person. For children with one-on-one aides, what's happening with that now? How do we support our children while many of us are working parents, myself included? What does our involvement level need to be, especially during working hours? And will we receive any parent training to help us facilitate this at home? What do the service and accommodation implementation look like at home? So how do we put that together? Will my child receive compensatory services and recovery hours? How will APS assess and measure progress for my child's IEP? And how does technology play into all of this? And lastly, our Arlington Tiered System of Supports, ATSS. So to maximize our time with Dr. Durán and the Office of Special Education this evening, we culled through these questions, selected the most frequent and the ones that we felt were critical to understand in the return to school process. So we sent them to the team ahead of time so that we could get, so that they could get and work with as many of their necessary business partners as possible to come back with these answers for tonight. So we have a lot of topics to get through, and we're going to begin with general return to school questions. Okay, perfect. So the questions for this section are as follows. What are driving return to school decisions? Is it budget, insurance, liability, teacher availability, facility safety? What is APS's plan to ensure equity and consistency from school to school in communication, services offered, and delivery of services? How will APS ensure students with disabilities are meaningfully included in remote instruction alongside non-disabled peers? How will attendance and truancy be handled with students with disabilities? If they make an attempt to attend, even for a few minutes, will that count for the day? And lastly, are universal design for learning principles being used in the delivery of virtual instruction? If so, can you provide some examples? If not, why not?
Okay, so we'll let Dr. Durán start off with answering a few of those, and then we'll jump in with the rest of the answers.
A big question I think that everyone is asking is really around reopening criteria. When will we be able to return? What are we looking at? So you can see here, it's something I've been sharing at every opportunity that I have publicly, and certainly in our school board meetings, is and tomorrow we'll have a monitoring report with additional data, and we're actually working on developing a dashboard publicly so folks can see what the data looks like with regards to this criteria. But really there's 6 key criteria we're looking at. First, and they're not necessarily in this order because they're all interconnected, but key obviously is student and family preferences and understanding where families would like in terms of their safety to have students return to either in person or not. Our employee work preferences, and we have to make sure that we have a balance and a capacity to deliver that based upon the need that we see. We currently, as you know, are all in virtual learning, and all employees and students, as we work through this process, and they see the health and safety measures we're putting in place, and as you monitor the data like we are, we'll be given an opportunity to provide us their preferences. We also have to look carefully at our employees and our student and family preference so that we know that we're not able to have put students in harm, and we're really ensure that we can have a safe environment. Because what we know is, and I know all of us know this from our personal lives, the way we interact now in day to day, there are new strategies of things we have to do, and there's new ways of being. And so if we don't have the right staff to student ratio to do that, that could cause a health concern. We also have to make sure we have the availability of personal protective equipment and all the custodial supplies needed to put all those strategies into place. And then we're going to be paying attention to 10 key health metrics related to local, regional, and national data. And again, I encourage you to look at the monitoring report that I'll be sharing tomorrow. It'll go into much greater detail on those metrics. I also include a copy of that monitoring report on every Tuesday letter that I send out, so you can easily access it there if you don't watch the school board meeting tomorrow or don't want to search online for it, but you certainly can find it there. But there are 10 key health metrics that we're looking at And then, of course, the guidance that we receive from the local, state and federal CDC, whether what phase that we're in right now, whether we can return. So those are key criteria that we're looking at. And even within that criteria, as I stated earlier, we are then going to be phasing in and putting priority on our students who we know will have the most difficulty in the virtual learning experience. And so this criteria and the work thus far, I'll say it again, has been helping us through our task force. Been a part of this. We've also have many internal work groups. We now are looking forward to developing a work group on returning to school for our students with disabilities and how we can prioritize them. The second question I heard was about equity, and this is a good question about consistency. First thing that was told to me by many different people, and every time I meet with groups, is, what are you going to do about APS? Because it's, the whole notion of a systems of school, or is it a school system? Are there individual schools that operate differently, or are there some expectations that APS has? We do and are working closely on that, because it's very important that we have consistency. So I've been meeting with building administrators, and we will be meeting with them to help develop common and consistent plans of action to ensure consistency around how we're delivering the virtual model, the health measures, of course, and then the communication that we're putting in place. We're trying to have consistent communication that I'm sending weekly. We have our Engage page that we've been developing. I know that our office, Dr. Krug, got correct this time, and Ms. Rothenbuescher are developing a weekly message that will be going out for communication from the division. And then how do we work with our schools? Because as I said earlier, that equity is about meeting everyone's needs. And so how are we ensuring that that's happened? Doesn't mean it will look the same in every school and with every student. There may be the need to address instructional models, programs, and strategies from an equitable lens. The example I mentioned about phasing in, that's not the same. We're not saying all students we phased in the same. And even looking at our students with disabilities, I want us to prioritize those students who need that one-on-one support to be the very first group. We've had up to this point a hybrid model that would be 2 days, and for one group, 2 days for another, and then a Monday that would be virtual. But with this work group, we're going to look at that. Is that even doable and manageable for a student who needs one-on-one support to have only 2 days and then another cohort? Or how can we create a safe way, knowing what we know about the mitigation strategies, for those students to be every day, or at least the 4 days? So we're looking at that from an equitable perspective to say, yes, here's our plan overall, but what do we need to do differently for students that might need a different support?
And Dr. Durán, I'm sorry, I'm just going to give the sign language interpreters a chance to switch.
Okay.
Okay. I think they're ready. I think you're good to go, Dr. Durán.
Okay. So those were the first two questions I think that were asked. And the next question was with regards, I think I want to turn that one over to Dr. Krug.
Actually, I'll take that one.
Okay, thank you.
There were questions about inclusion, and would inclusion be provided in the virtual environment, and what would that look like? Absolutely, there will be inclusive opportunities while we're in the virtual learning model for students to participate with non-disabled peers. Students with disabilities will have the opportunity to participate in small groups and a variety of activities with non-disabled peers. These interactions will be planned with intentionality to increase the meaningful interactions that occur in those sessions. Some examples of virtual inclusive opportunities include instructional groups, co-taught classes, and asynchronous activities. Also morning meetings, movement breaks, social emotional learning, and electives, clubs, and extracurricular activities, as those become available, are absolutely opportunities for inclusive interactions. And then there was a question about attendance. Students with disabilities be marked absent if they are only able to participate for a portion of the day. The Virginia regulations indicate that if a student participates in a portion of their day, they are marked present for the day. It does not say how long the student has to participate. So if the student is present during the school day, they will be marked as attended. Another tool that we have is that the IEP team can consider a modified schedule for students with disabilities if they really just don't have the stamina to manage a full-time virtual experience each day. Some of the things that the IEP team should consider is what they need to do to ensure that the IEP accurately depicts the decision to shorten the normal day by adjusting the services page and the page with the least restrictive environment. So we do caution our teams that they should take consideration of the normal school day, all the services that are provided within that time frame, and make sure that the students are receiving the services that they need to continue to make progress on their goals. The IEP team should always carefully monitor that progress, especially during a shortened schedule, and document the service provisions to develop a plan for a student to move forward into a full school schedule when they are able to do so. So we have a few tools that we can use to make sure that students are receiving the correct dosage of services and supports that they can manage during this period.
Thanks, Heather. And to build off of our inclusion and our inclusive practices, there was a question about, will the universal design for learning principles be utilized? And the answer is yes. We absolutely are working with our teachers to look at the 3 guiding principles around the UDL framework, and that, that's looking at, do our students have multiple means of engagement? Are we looking at their interests? Are we putting in structures to sustain their attention and helping them, with self-regulation and attentive needs? Are we providing multiple means of representation in our instruction? Are we looking at, the different supports they may need in terms of visuals or audio, interpretation, things like that? And also looking at multiple means for them to express their work and their learning. I'm so sorry, my dog is barking. And so to build off of that, just to provide a few concrete examples of how UDL principles will be used, we are looking at recording instruction for some of our students so that they can watch that asynchronously, whether that's to review content, to provide a pre-teach opportunity if they've missed class and they need to review it, that will be available. Augmenting our instruction through written materials or voice recordings, providing copies of notes and presentations, allowing them to slow down their rate or their pace, extended time, providing our assessments in multiple formats, or providing opportunities for them to demonstrate their competency in a variety of ways. So these are just a few high-level ones that we work with our teachers to ensure that our students can access the universal design for learning. Additionally, we are creating another work group. We're focused on the accessibility work group, and we're bringing together initially some staff from APS, and then we're going to bring in some of our community members. It's time that we really take a deep review of all of our instructional resources to ensure that they are fully ADA compliant, and that includes for our parents as well. So that's ensuring that even if our parents have a visual impairment or are blind, that they can use their screen readers to access the instructional resources to support their child at home. So we are working on that. That work is going to begin in the towards the end of August, and then it'll be a journey as we go through. We're looking at accessibility for our own staff, so we're really excited about this upcoming work. And then that will move us into our next theme.
Allison, you're on mute.
Thank you, Kathleen. Before we move into the questions, I just want to make a couple of notes based on the chat, just some administrative things. There were some questions about translation services. Unfortunately, we were not able to figure out how to stream so many requests at once. So those will be posted on YouTube after the fact. And we apologize for that. This is a new format for us. And we're learning as we go. What can I say? And the other question was the closed captioning. Unfortunately, our captioner was MIA. So we unfortunately do not have closed captioning at this time, but again, we can post a video afterwards with captioning on it. So you can go to our YouTube channel and find those in the next few days or so. So now I'll move on to the IEP and 504 considerations. There seems to be a lot of confusion surrounding the change of instructional time from 30 hours to 24 hours per week, and its effect on IEPs and 504s. With respect to this topic, can you guys walk us through these points? What explicit instruction was given to staff about a maximum of 24 hours in special education services per week, and how was this decided on? We understand that virtual learning by definition does not include time spent on things like transitions and other non-academic tasks. Can you do a breakdown of the change in hours? What will happen with IEPs and 504s where parents will not agree to the amended IEP or 504? Or if they feel language in the prior written notice is not sufficient? When IEP and 504 teams meet to address these changes, can a distance learning plan or addendum be attached to the existing IEP or 504, rather than altering the agreed upon IEP 504? If not, why not? Mondays have been referred to as a day for additional supports, in addition to teacher meetings. Is this considered part of the 24 hours? And finally, for evaluations that were in progress when school shut down in March, will APS direct student study teams to accept private evaluations in order to not further delay the development of needed IEPs?
Thanks, Allison. I use this slide to kind of take a global look at some of those topics, and then the next slide I'll answer some of the specific questions that were in there. I do want to apologize for any confusion that was caused by our guidance surrounding IEPs moving into our new instructional model. Our intent was never to reduce services or to have a downward trend of IEP availability. We certainly do not want schools to be changing IEPs without parent input. So with that being said, the schools are reviewing the IEPs and they're reaching out to families to schedule meetings. With this current distance learning model of 24 instructional hours, some IEPs may need to be revised to ensure students are receiving the support they need to access their learning and make meaningful progress on their IEPs. In some cases, these hours may temporarily be reduced to reflect what the student requires in this model and the number of instructional hours available to provide that service. In other cases, we're seeing that services may actually need to be increased. And when school resumes the normal 30-hour instructional week, IEP teams will reconvene to make the changes to reflect the services that the students needed before we went to this new instructional model. Each student's IEP will be thoughtfully reviewed for any possible needs they have accessing distance learning. The purpose, as I said, is not to reduce hours in an arbitrary way or make adjustments in any sort of proportion, but to ensure students receive meaningful instruction and services they need to continue to make progress. IEP teams may determine to amend an IEP without holding a team meeting. However, the case carrier, parents, and other team members must consult and discuss a proposed IEP amendment prior to the amendment being emailed to the family for consent. As always, any changes in an IEP require parental consent. We have also provided to our schools a template to carefully be able to document the services in the IEP that were changed. It's very explicit. It says the student had X amount of services for this area and they were changed to this. This is to give a roadmap to our teams when we come back to that 30-hour week to be able to say, okay, where were we before? and what did we change, so that everyone can be assured that the changes that are made are not permanent, that you can always retrieve the services that you had prior to this new instructional model. So now I'll go to the next slide. And these are some of the specific questions that were in the slide that you had, Allison. What will happen with IEPs and 504s where parents will not agree? The IEP team will continue to try and collaborate with families to get consensus. However, if there is a situation where the IEP teams cannot reach consensus, then parents have the right not to sign, and APS would operate under a stay put IEP, which is the same in a normal instructional model. When IEP 504 teams meet to address these changes, can a distance learning plan or addendum be attached to the existing plan rather than altering the agreed upon IEP or 504? So I think this is another area of confusion. The addendum is a process we use within Synergy, which is our system where we document IEPs. It's to make changes to IEPs that are already finalized. So once you do an addendum, that change goes into the finalized IEP and it becomes part of that document. It's not a standalone document. It's a tool that we have to be able to make small revisions and changes within a finalized IEP. Mondays have been referred to as a day for additional supports. Is this considered part of the 24 hours? Yes, that day is. And for evaluations that are in progress when schools shut down in March, will APS direct student study teams to accept private evaluations in order to not further delay the development of IEPs? APS will begin virtual assessments in the fall. As always, if a family has done private testing, the team will consider the data from those tests as well.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and take over here with in-person instruction. Before I jump into the in-person instruction, I know we've had a lot of questions pop up on the chat here. If we are unable to answer those questions now, either through our presentation or with a response from one of the panelists, we are going to take these questions and try to circle back with parents at a later date and time. So for these in-person instruction questions, parents ask, what benchmarks does Arlington need to meet that will allow for prioritized populations to return in person? What data are you using? What factors are taken into consideration when deciding who can return and when? Will students with the most significant support needs, Shriver Program, Life Skills, MIPA, Interlude, deaf and hard of hearing, blind and visually impaired, and that PEP be prioritized ahead of the greater students with disabilities population during the initial phases of reopening? If some in-person daycare services will be provided for children of APS staff, why is it not possible to provide limited in-person instructional support for those students with the greatest needs? And lastly, can services be offered in person at the school by appointment during distance learning? What if the therapists and or aides are willing to work one-on-one with students at their homes, an outdoor space, or community center?
Thanks, Kathleen. So, you know, as Dr. Durán had said earlier in his opening statement, we are creating a working group to begin to think about what are the earliest groups that we can bring in students. But before I get into that, I do kind of want to reiterate, we are ready to be flexible with our students and our families. Our schools, the IEP teams, know that every family situation is different, and that we need to, you know, provide as many options as we can to work with our families in each of their situations to try to the best of our ability to support our students through this distance learning model. However, when the question is asked, what data do we use? What benchmarks do we have to make some of those early decisions? We use IEP data, We use data from you all. We hear you. We heard all of you. We've heard from our schools and our teachers the sense of urgency for many of our students who we know need significant support. They need significant support in face-to-face instruction. And we know that through a distance learning model, they need instruction. So we are creating what we called, a special education working group to begin to think about how will we bring in some of our students who really require that one-to-one support. And as we build that group, we absolutely are going to be reaching out to ASAC and SEPTA to have some representatives, maybe some other parent groups as well. I hesitated to put in something by the end of September because these things are really out of our control right now. There's transportation that we have to work out. There's staffing, there's safety protocols, there's facilities. But, I want you all to know that it is a sense of urgency for us. And we do need to establish some criteria so that we can determine who are our very first group of students. Some of that criteria, and these are, not set in stone, these are just open ideas right now, are, first and foremost, our students who we know already engage in a modified curriculum or perhaps participate in the Virginia Alternative Assessment. Some of our students who have mobility needs, and we know they need hand over hand to use their device to even access Teams and Canvas. And then some of our other students where the IEP teams have already delineated that they need, adult support throughout the entire school day. So we will be working as a group to establish that criteria. We'll be working with our schools to determine which students kind of meet that first set of criteria, reaching out to families to explore options, and then determining which families would like to consider those options. So that's where we are in really ensuring that all of our students get free and appropriate public education, because that's our responsibility. And I believe that brings us to a similar topic of, one-to-one aides.
Okay, this builds off a little bit from the last topic. How will you address FAPE for children who need one-on-one supports during the day? And I'm sorry, FAPE is free, appropriate public education. For example, one parent wrote, "My child has a visual impairment, utilizes high-tech speech-generated device to communicate, has severe speech and motor impairments secondary to his diagnosis of cerebral palsy. Prior to distance learning, he relied substantially on an aide to literally be his eyes and hands. Without getting into the details, we really had challenges of accessing the curriculum during the closure in spring. With Remote Learning 2.0, how will you reallocate aides, paraprofessionals, to meet the needs of a steady continuum of communication supports in a general education setting? Will one-on-one aides still be working virtually with students, and what will that look like?" This question is submitted by a teacher. Many parents are requesting in-home services based on the fact that their children cannot access virtual learning independently. How can teachers support those children without going into their home? Specific training is welcome.
Okay, thank you. And this does definitely build upon the previous topic that Kelly was discussing. As far as trying to provide FAPE to our students, the IEP teams are going to continuously collaborate and offer multiple options of instruction and monitor the IEP progress on those goals. This could include alternative schedules, more asynchronous instruction, coaching for parents, instruction recorded to review flexibly throughout the day, and shorter instructional sessions. Continuous data is going to be taken. We're going to really monitor these students and be able to identify, are they making progress? The strategies that we're using, are they effective? What else can we do? Some students will need recovery services when they return to school. Some students may not make the level of progress that we would have seen if they were receiving in-person instruction. The assistants will still be working. They'll be working virtually to provide extra support to our students. They will be providing check-ins, they'll help review material, work with parents, they'll pre-teach and reteach content as needed. And we are, as Kelly mentioned, working on a plan to return some of our most vulnerable populations to in-person instruction. And so we're reviewing the current staffing requirements. As Kelly mentioned, there's a lot of operations that have to be involved with that, as well as the safety and health plans that need to be developed. And so there was a question about instruction and accommodations. We will still provide accommodations with the instruction. Some of the ways that we might be able to do that during the virtual sessions are shorter chunks of direct instruction, breaks, extended time, provision of more asynchronous activities or recorded lessons, flexible scheduling, checklists, one-to-one sessions, and small breakout groups to pre-teach and reteach those skills.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't know what I just did. I'm trying to figure out that, but we'll go to the next section as I try to figure this out.
Yeah. So questions on working parents, parent involvement, and parent training. And, you know, working parent here, 3 kids, 2 with IEPs have to be online all at the same time. So this thought, it resonates with me very well. So if you can flip to the next slide here. So many of our families have parents that both work full-time and or have multiple children in the home. A number of questions reflected concern over how to support their children and keep their jobs. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act has provisions which assist parents to acquire the necessary skills that will allow them to support the implementation of their child's IEP. Will APS be willing to engage parents who are able to provide support to their children during online learning period? If yes, will this extend to 504s? And what parent trainings will be offered for the myriad of platforms we'll be using? Is it possible just to simplify? And you know, what other trainings are planned?
Hi, everyone. I am Kelly Mountain. I'm one of the coordinators at the Parent Resource Center. I first just want to say hello to all of our families that we know, and also a warm welcome to any of our families that might be new to special education or to SEPTA. I want to start out and chat a little bit about our parent academies that we can use to support our families. As announced in Dr. Durán's past couple of school talk messages, to assist our families in with this whole distance learning concept, APS is relaunching the APS Parent Academy. And this will begin next week on August 24th. And the Parent Academy will begin first with a series of pre-recorded courses, video tutorials, and additional resources designed to help enhance families' understanding of processes related to distance learning, and to also help you optimize your students' experiences while learning at home. The videos and resources will provide information from APS educators about distance learning and address parent concerns and frequent questions. A couple of the topics that we have so far: what distance learning is and what it will look like, tips for supporting your student in setting up a successful learning environment at home via Microsoft Teams, how to access and use Canvas, Seesaw, and other applications, global protect connections and troubleshooting. I'm going to learn about that. Delivery of specialized services and supports in synchronous and asynchronous. And finally, social emotional learning. And we hope to be adding to this list of programs very quickly. I'm going to turn this over to my colleague, Kathleen Donovan.
Hi, everybody. It's such a pleasure to see such a great group of families and staff gathered tonight. One of the things I was thinking about, and I know we're going to be brief, to just talk to you a little bit about what the PRC will be doing, was just sort of what the history is. And fun fact, the PRC in Arlington Public Schools has just completed 30 years of supporting families. And the PRC was started by parents like you many years ago. Our first 2 staff members were parents of kids with disabilities. And APS has supported family engagement through the Parent Resource Center for more than 30 years. And I think that I'm always somebody who looks for silver linings. And I think one of the silver linings that we recognized last year was how important it was that we do continue our work and our family engagement. We've always known parents are critical members of educational teams. Obviously, tonight, that's what we're talking about significantly in this area of the presentation, is how critical indeed you are, and also how much more you're going to hopefully learn about your learner, and how much more you can collaborate with your IEP team. So Kelly and I are very enthusiastic. We were very grateful to support the work of our wonderful administrators, Heather and Kelly, and the amazing parent community, and all of our colleagues last spring. We had a significant increase in phone calls and video consultations with parents, as well as a really significant uptick in visits to our website. So we went very quickly, as all of us did, from being a live PRC to a virtual PRC. And that's what we plan to do during the upcoming year. And we're very eager to support this important work. So we will continue engaging with families one-to-one with video consultations or phone consultations. We will continue to support the Parent Academy that Kelly just talked about, but also we'll offer live events as we've always done, but they'll be virtual. So rather than just pre-recorded videos, we do hope to have some live events. We've been working really hard on increasing the amount of tools and resources, and I think the data we collected last spring showed that parents were using that. So we're very eager to continue putting our energy into developing more tools for you, and also with you. So please send us your ideas. We want to know what you need with regard to parent training, with regard to learning opportunities, with regard to tools that would help you. We probably cluttered your email inbox significantly last spring. So we do apologize for that. But one of the ways we tried to be available to you was by sharing information from webinars happening in the community to SEPTA events and special advisory committee events from our administrators, and just news and updates and opportunities available. So we will continue that and hope to be a clearinghouse to disseminate information and resources to all of you. And then finally, we want to continue to closely collaborate with the Office of Special Education, with our wonderful leadership team at Arlington SEPTA, as well as our tremendous leadership team, in the Arlington Special Education Advisory Committee. One of the other projects that we love sponsoring with SEPTA is our parent liaison projects. I think Kelly was going to tell you a little bit more about that, since she has taken the lead with our SEPTA parent liaisons.
Sure, thanks, Kathleen. So the Special Education Parent Liaison Program is really a partnership between us at the PRC and SEPTA. And simply put, it is a parent-to-parent support system. And liaisons support and encourage the flow of information between each of the schools, the PRC, SEPTA, and the community. So they're blasting out information to their school communities about what's going on and what might support their students. And liaison serves as points of contact for families interested in connecting with another parent of a child with special needs in their individual schools. So it is a great support for our families. We, SEPTA and the PRC, work to have a liaison in each school or program, and we are working on updating our list for 2021, and it should be posted fairly quickly so that parents can know who their liaison is in the school and how to connect with them. It's a great program.
All right. And Kelly, can families contact, they can contact the PRC and contact you and SEPTA if you're interested in volunteering to be a liaison at your school. We'd love to welcome you to the group. Okay, so I think one of the other specific questions that came forward from the parent community is how, the opportunities we talked about were kind of general and more specific to larger group lessons and opportunities for families. But we know that many of you have very unique situations, and are asking how you can support your learner at home and what supports can be provided to you. So Kelly and I have always advocated for families to be closely in touch with IEP teams. And as you engage in IEP meetings in the upcoming weeks, we really hope that one of the things you'll be sure to discuss with your IEP team is how you will set up effective two-way communication so that you can celebrate your child's successes, but also share concerns early on if any issues arise that might need to be addressed. Kelly and Heather have been working with our teams and our student support coordinators to ensure that staff are available to provide coaching and consultation for families as part of the IEP process. And this can happen through email, phone calls, video sessions. And it can also involve, instruction and modeling on use of assistive technology or other learning tools. So if you have an issue or concern, please bring it to your IEP team. We always advocate sharing information in advance of your IEP meeting with the team. We even have a little template. So if you want to email us at prc@apsva.us, we'll be glad to get that to you. But let your team know what supports you need and what your child needs. Staff will, as Kelly mentioned earlier, there are some videos and trainings to help families know how to navigate the online resource and platforms that our students will be using, so that hopefully we can provide both direct and consultative intervention.
Thank you, Kathleen. And I just want to put a plug in for Parent Resource Center. They really are such a wonderful resource. And there's, between Kelly and Kathleen, there's so much knowledge there that's useful for parents with a myriad of questions. So please do take advantage of that resource. So we are moving on to service and accommodation implementation at home. Will there be flexibility in scheduling related services for families for whom an adult is not in the position to work with their child online through a full school day, or for students receiving instruction in a general education setting? When should parents expect these services to begin? How will teams decide when teletherapy or parent coaching will be used? Can you provide us with some examples of how Microsoft Teams might be used to deliver the following IEP 504 services? Executive functioning interventions, Orton-Gillingham, and there was a sub question about Orton-Gillingham. Would the instructional setting in the IEP be special education, general education, or both? And social skills in the general education setting. Will flexible, alternative, asynchronous, non-screen based activities and materials be available for students who cannot attend to extended screen time or who cannot access the curriculum without the aid of parents during work hours? Can schools set up a system to loan out things like chair rubber bands, fidgets, wiggle seats, and other accommodations that students would be using in the classroom? Families may not necessarily own these items, and it could help us support our kids with IEPs and 504s in the distance learning setting.
Yeah, Allison, before we switch over, I just want to mention at 8 o'clock, they're going to be switching the interpreters again for those that are following along.
Thanks, Kathleen. Should I give it a second? I see Caitlin on, she's ready. Okay. So the first thing I want to talk a little bit about are, how our teachers will be using Teams and Canvas, and just to help provide a little bit of clarification. Teams, Microsoft Teams, is really a tool that our teachers will use to provide that, face-to-face virtual instruction. So whether that's for the whole class, a small group, or an individual. Within that, our teachers are learning features like how to create breakout groups, how to provide additional instruction to reinforce main lessons, or even how to create those sessions for the specific IEP goal instruction where that specially designed instruction is needed. Canvas, on the other hand, is another tool for our teachers that really help them design their course, create those assignments, provide instructional resources that can be both used for synchronous and asynchronous activities. And within Canvas, there are several supports to help with executive functioning needs. These include calendar reminders for due dates, missing assignments, to-do lists, how assignments can be chunked and prioritized, using the announcements page. So these are two tools that teachers would really use together to help our students access their learning. To go into some additional ways, because I know this has been a big question with a lot of our families, is, really how will our students with executive function needs be supported? And so I spoke of a little within Canvas and things like that. But, working to chunk that instruction. We know that they will need time to process that information, to have that information prioritized, recording that to review at a different time, providing those additional check-ins. I think this is where the use of our special education assistants can be so critical, providing more time for asynchronous opportunities, supporting our students just like we would in face-to-face with goal setting and self-monitoring, designing checklists that they can use at home, rubrics, planning guides, and then, the UDL principles, multimedia examples, visuals, audio recordings, and things like that. So those are a few examples. To answer some of the specific questions, services will begin on September 8th. That is our first day of school for our students. We absolutely are going to try to be as flexible as we can with our families. However, I do need to note that we need to honor our teachers' contract times, and we won't be asking our teachers to provide services outside of their contract time at this moment in the juncture. Will Microsoft Teams be used to deliver IEP and 504 services for Orton Gillingham? Absolutely. Like I said, Teams is that tool to create that face-to-face visual and virtual instruction. However, Orton, that's just how to deliver the instruction. We will be delivering Orton Gillingham virtually. We actually are creating Orton Gillingham toolkits to send home to students that need to receive this methodology. Where it's provided, whether that's a special ed setting or a general ed setting, we would follow what's delineated on the IEP that addresses where their IEP, their decoding and spelling goals are implemented. We would still honor those settings. Same with social skills. So if, we've decided that their social skills instruction should be in the gen ed setting, they will be embedded within the gen ed setting, whether that's through morning meetings or other opportunities like that, or if it's explicit and structured instruction that's happening in a pullout group. Deciding if we're going to use teletherapy or parent coaching, that's an IEP decision, and whether it's our special education teachers or related service providers, you all as a team will talk about what that student needs, what your family situation is, and really determine what the best approach for your therapy is for that. And then can we loan out different objects like rubber chairs or fidgets that they might have used? Absolutely. We think this can be possible. We'll start to work with our schools and PRC to maybe think of a checkout system. We need to kind of take inventory of what's in our schools, but I think that is certainly a possibility that we can explore. And that moves us to compensatory and services and recovery hours.
Okay. So these are some of the questions that we had in this theme here. Can you distinguish for families and staff the difference between recovery hours and compensatory services? How will students be assessed for regression, and will IEP and 504 teams be reconvened as a result? Are there guidelines or expectations for compensatory services? What will be the process to determine compensatory services once school returns to in-person? And lastly, when will IEP teams discuss and provide recovery services? Will this wait until after the pandemic is over, or is there a plan to start sooner? For a child that has a one-on-one aide, what does this look like?
Okay, so before I kind of begin into the protocol that we are going to have to determine recovery services, I just want to give a little bit of background to the group. I know we're running short on time, but I think it's helpful. Sometimes compensatory services, recovery services, makeup services might be used interchangeably. However, traditionally, compensatory services have not expressively been defined in IDEA. However, the courts have long awarded compensatory educational services as an appropriate remedy under IDEA when a student has been denied that free and appropriate public education. And that's really what we've used as a term pre-COVID. Since COVID, when we're looking at the school closure, if services were needed to ensure FAPE and those services were so complex or could not be reasonably provided through the virtual learning platform or other alternative means that were available to the student, then the IEP team will need to determine the extent, if any, to what the traditional compensatory services will need to be provided. And that is being called recovery services right now for COVID. We are giving our IEP team some very explicit guidance that actually is coming right from VDOE, which has been really helpful. They kind of give us a three-pronged approach that I'll discuss in a second. And we will have a process to determine which students might need that. We will be looking at the spring and what recovery services students might have needed from the spring. And then, after distance learning is done and we go back in person, we might need to look again at recovery services for distance learning that need to be done in person. But when we think of the three-pronged approach, we're looking really at a triangulation. What data did we have before we had the COVID closure? Looking at the review of their progress on their IEP goals or their objectives, observational data from parents, from therapists, from teachers, screening assessments, other assessments that we had, where was that baseline in the spring before we closed? Then we need to look at the data that we have from the closure time. And that is where we really are collaborating with our families, because some of that data will be provided by our families because they are the ones often, monitoring some of that instruction that's happening at home. So whether that's looking at observations, samples of their work, different behavior logs, additional screenings and assessments, parent interviews and observations. We're gonna, take a look at the spring data. We're gonna take a look at the pre-spring and during spring closure. And then we need to gather some new data. And we need to look at a variety of tools that we can use, that just-in-time formative assessment that our teachers will be working with in the fall to really kind of answer these three questions. Does the student require an extensive review to demonstrate previously learned skills that they had before we closed? Does the student demonstrate inconsistencies in performance? And does the student demonstrate previously mastered or partially acquired skills acquired pre-COVID closure? So as we kind of gather all of that data and come together as a team, we'll have to make that decision as a team. And this is really a collaborative process. This is really where our schools and our families need to work together to really look at, how is that student doing? And the need for COVID recovering services should be based on whether or not the student continued making progress in the general education curriculum as specified on their IEP, or towards meeting their individualized goals, or if any significant regression occurred during this period of closure. It's also important for our families to know that when recovery services, or what is normally called compensatory services, they're not like a minute for minute or an hour for hour replacement. It's really a collective decision. For some students, they may have regressed on some goals, but not all. So we'll really look at, where are they? Where did we expect them to be? And what does the team think that, that student needs to kind of make up for where they were? Every student has a different level of stamina, so it'll be a very case-by-case decision. And through VDOE, we're really going to instruct our teachers to give it 6 to 8 weeks of instruction to really gather all that data and then start to partner with our families to determine, if we need to provide some recovery services. And we're certainly ready as a school system to, know that some of our students will need recovery services. So we'll be working with that. And that brings us to our next topic of assessment and progress measurement. I think that's Allison.
So for questions in assessments and progress management, how will data be collected for IEP goals? Will that be done by the parents through virtual teacher evaluation? Will parents be trained on data collection? Will case carriers or student support coordinators proactively reach out weekly to parents to check in and ensure needs are being met for the first few weeks of school at least? Or is APS expecting parents to reach out only if there's an issue?
Thanks, Allison. Teachers and related service providers will be collecting data on IEP progress. This, as in the regular school in-person instructional model, we will use a variety of tools to collect that data. We use student products, assignments they've completed. We use our own data sheets. We collect data on frequency, duration, a variety of different ways to assess skills. The parents are not expected to collect data, but any input that they can give us is very valuable. Their observations and input into the things that they see in the home give us a really good sense of how the students are generalizing the skills that they are learning in those school settings, and this being the virtual setting, when they're working on those skills. How are they carrying those over to home and other environments? If parents are interested in collecting data and they want more resources, we're more than happy to have our service providers train them and provide them the tools to do that. As far as communication with families, our case carriers will develop communication plans with each of their families. The frequency and level of communication may vary across the families depending on the parents' preferences. So families should always feel comfortable reaching out to their student school if they have concerns or questions. But some families like weekly communication, some families like less frequent communication. So it's really up to the case carrier and the parents to develop that plan together. But communication will be key in this situation.
Okay, so we'll move on to technology. So the questions in this theme had to do with the following. Is there a way to record a teacher's instruction for the students so that students can access the material after class if there are questions, connectivity issues, which I know we've all faced at some point in the last 6 months, and or if the student is having difficulty attending? Is there a plan to require a standard platform in Canvas so that all teachers are required to assign work in the same way, time, and place, starting from the beginning of the school year? Next, previously, teachers were able to utilize software that allowed live monitoring of student iPad activity. When used properly, this was beneficial to an easily distractible student with ADHD. And will parents be provided the ability to use this software in order to provide in-home monitoring for online learning? Next question was, for kids who do not currently have an APS issued device, when should we expect them? And lastly, is it your expectation that all learning can be completed on an APS issued device? If so, how do students access needed information that's blocked on APS devices, such as YouTube videos, which are occasionally assigned by the teachers?
I believe this slide was going to be covered by Dr. Durán.
Thank you. My mute was on. Sorry about that. So yes, we are working on our devices, and we're really happy that we're able to now have devices for all of our students, and those will be available by the beginning of the school year. Using our CARES Act funding, we're able to now make sure that all students have them. We're working on the ones that we ordered and getting them distributed. So those will be distributed by the beginning of the school year for the devices. In terms of the recording, yes, we are working to have teachers be able to record their lessons so that they can access them. As I stated in my opening remarks, I think that's very important for us to have those, either for students who might need a break or maybe need to go back and just review it, either for either reason or perhaps many other reasons, but those are the two primary reasons why we want to make sure that that's available. We do have schools that are working right now with their teachers to build consistency amongst the Canvas courses at each school to make sure that we have some consistency. We heard a lot of feedback on that. And so that is something that we're working on. In terms of being able to monitor and use the same device, the same program, excuse me, that teachers had, yes, parents do have and can have access to that. There's a couple of caveats to that. That in order to have that, you need to make sure that you also have an Apple device or iPad, which is an Apple device or computer. And then simply there, when you open the app, there's the ability to connect with the students via Bluetooth. So the key is you have to have an Apple device, you have to have within Bluetooth range, and then the student would need to accept your invite to have a request to be followed. And then as long as that's happened and you're within range of one another, then you would be able to have the Apple Classroom app, which is what the question was about in terms of what teachers had previously. So teachers were able to use this, and yes, parents, to the question, would be able to access that. In terms of reporting and monitoring, our instructional services department is also working on new ways that we could help provide parents with greater information on reporting. So that we can have that for you available. But right now, the essential question was, can you have the same access that teachers did? And yes, there is a way with those caveats. As you can see also, YouTube is currently available to our high school students only, and elementary and middle school teachers are advised not to use that for instruction. So we are looking at how we can enhance technology. We welcome any additional suggestions or how we can work toward making that easier for you in terms of the access piece.
Okay, and as far as professional learning for our teachers in regards to technology, the teachers and assistants and staff will be engaging in professional learning for the next 2 weeks when they return to their contract days. And they will learn strategies to engage learners virtually. They'll be able to learn some strategies for building a classroom community. They will have digital resources for Canvas, Teams, Seesaw, and Nearpod to incorporate in their instruction. They will be completing modules on core vocabulary and Lexia reading. So a very robust professional learning plan is in place for the pre-service weeks prior to the teachers introducing themselves to their new students.
Okay, and the last section really falls under the Arlington tiered system of support. While there weren't any specific questions that were submitted on this through other parent emails and engage emails, we did get some questions around how ATSS will be implemented this fall. So, you know, our school system is committed to this framework. This is an evidence-based framework that we know can both be preventative and targeted to help support our students. So it will be implemented in the virtual setting. It still is going to be grounded in the, you know, same 5 main components of that rigorous, differentiated tier or core instruction, using universal screening and assessment, progress monitoring. I emphasize that. Using our research-based interventions and then making those data-based decisions. You know, I'm really excited for some of our format this year with the Mondays for our teachers to be able to have that collaborative time that is critical to the foundation of a tiered system of support, where not only will our classroom teachers and core content teachers be meeting, but they will have an opportunity to have their L teacher, their special ed teacher, the gifted resource teacher, their math coach, their reading, so on and so on, to really together look at each individual need, put those plans into place, adjust instruction, and plan for those supports. And I had mentioned earlier that we are planning on, to the best of our extent, implementing some of our interventions virtually. Not all of our interventions will work out virtually, but we are trying to look at other resources that our teachers can use because you know, like we said, we are dedicated to providing all of our students with what they need, you know, and we believe in that equitable education of every student getting what they need. So we are working on those interventions virtually. And I believe that brings us to our last slide. And I'll turn it back over to SEPTA.
And amazingly, we actually have a few minutes. I can't believe it. So let's see. One question we got during our student support meeting, where it was determined my son needs to be tested for IEP eligibility, the school psychologist told us it was unethical to test a child when they are just returning to school from a pandemic. She said, we have to wait 8 weeks after school started before they would start testing. Is this correct, or will this change since virtual testing will be done?
Well, I think that's a tricky question since I wasn't there to be part of all of the meeting and hear all of the discussion. You know, we are, for the very first time as a school system, really working out our protocol of virtual assessments. And there are a variety of different types of assessments. There's the, you know, formative, the qualitative, non-normed criterion reference tests, and there are the standardized tests that are valid and normed. So, you know, I can't answer specifically if we can't begin for 6 to 8 weeks. There are certainly assessments and checklists and observation protocols that, you know, can begin. And as we flesh out our virtual assessment guide for some of those more traditional assessments that we use in special education, I think we'll have a little bit more guidance on that. We're still in the process of going through the different tests and their protocols. But you know, I don't think that all tests will wait. We certainly need to begin to get some data on our students. And Heather, I'm not sure if you want to add anything to that.
No, I'll just say that we've been working very hard on that virtual assessment guidance and building a plan throughout this summer. We're very close to having it finalized, and we have a team that just cannot wait to start working with our students and get back to the work that they missed in the spring and in the summer. So we will be holding virtual assessments very, very soon, and things may be a little bit different. We may be a little bit more creative, but we're still going to be getting the valuable data that will inform our decisions for each and every student that we look at.
I think we have time for one more, right, Allison?
I think so.
Okay, so we had Canvas pop up several times in here, and the consistency of it. So I guess Canvas is not used in the same way across the schools. I know we sort of touched on some of this earlier, but can you just talk about Canvas consistency, especially you know, across APS, not just within a particular school, but from school to school? And this might help parents that have kids at multiple schools get caught up with this faster.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in on this. I've been grateful to Kelly and Heather and Dr. Durán for sort of taking most of the questions, but since this is a DTL related question, well, a curriculum and instruction related question, I'll jump in on this one. And so I'm going to give sort of a history lesson and get to the response to your question. APS actually adopted Canvas as its learning management system 3 years ago. And at that time, we spent about a year getting our teachers acclimated to Canvas, sharing with them strategies and letting them play in the virtual sandbox with the expectation that all of our teachers would be using Canvas as a learning management system by the end of that year. Unfortunately, that expectation wasn't sort of initiated. And so our schools have been sort of permitted in the last couple of years to really sort of land on a learning management system that works well for them and for their teachers. And so I learned about this both as a practitioner, as the principal at Yorktown and at Swanson, and then when I entered this role in January. And, you know, as we've been moving from a system of schools to a school system, one of our commitments, as Dr. Durán referenced earlier, is that we need to have a consistent learning management system. And so I have articulated to our teachers that we will be moving fully to Canvas by June 30th at the end of this year. And in the meantime, those teachers who have not been using Canvas will have access to plenty of training opportunities with the expectation that they work towards making that transition before the end of the year. We did not feel that it was fair, particularly in a pandemic, to say to our teachers that those that were not using Canvas, that they needed to make that switch along with learning how to teach rigorously using synchronous instruction and through distance learning. And so I can absolutely guarantee that we will be full on Canvas as of June 30th. And that we're working to support our teachers who have not been using Canvas up until this point. That said, the majority of our secondary teachers do use Canvas, and we are expecting that they will continue to do so moving into this school year.
I think we can fit in one more question, and I'm sorry, it's kind of a big one, but it has to deal with consistency, sort of following up on what we started the presentation with. There's a question, let's see, HB Woodlawn is having its own forum tonight at the same time and are telling parents that they aren't asking or expecting teachers to record lessons. How can we get all schools and teachers on the same page? And following that is another question about consistency. How can we hold principals responsible for sending out a consistent message from APS Central?
Right, I'll jump in on that one as well. Let's start with the question about recording. We are sharing, DTL is sharing guidance documents with our principals and our teachers starting tomorrow, elementary and secondary guidance documents that really address the distance learning, delivery of instruction via distance learning. And one of those foci is on the recording of lessons. We're taking a page from the US Department of Ed that has given guidance that it's okay for teachers, it's okay, and they should be recording the mini lessons that they're delivering, but that we should have real precaution in recording classes in which students can be identified. We want to be able to protect students' privacy. And so in those guidance documents is the statement that teachers should be recording these mini lessons for a variety of reasons. You know, clearly students with disabilities and students who may need additional review can access those mini lessons. Students who are absent can access those mini lessons. And so we want to, in the interest of equity, allow for kids to have as much access to the delivery of new content and the practice of new content as we can. So I'll follow up with Dr. Robinson about that message, but do know that that information is being shared with staff as of tomorrow.
And add to that, Dr. Oh, sorry, just left.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to add that the consistency is very important, but we also have to make sure we're training and setting out the expectations clearly to all of our principals and our staff. And so having those 2 weeks coming up are going to be very important to provide these expectations, number one. And number two, the clarity and the training on how to do some of the things we're asking people to do. And so, you know, that was one of the reasons why, working with Ms. Loft and then getting the approval of our school board, that we were able to start the school year of September 8th and give us that additional week, because I am someone who strongly believes in consistency and making sure we have expectations for people, but we also have to have the training and the support and the clarity for that. And so I want to tell everyone that please let us know when you're seeing these inconsistencies. I don't expect overnight everything is going to become consistent, but I do expect that we are going to be clearer, holding those expectations. And when we hear these concerns, that we are addressing them right away. So to me, a big part is the training, clarity, and setting the expectation. And as a superintendent and as Ms. Loft is also part of the leadership of the division, we set those expectations and we're clear with principals, and then we expect them to model and set those for their staff as well. But for you as parents who might not be experiencing that consistency where you see an inconsistency, please let us know. I would appreciate that greatly so that we can follow up.
And that ends our time right at 8:30. So I want to thank all the panelists. Thank you so much for sticking with us at night and answering all these difficult questions. Thank you to the community for hundreds, literally hundreds of wonderful, important, necessary questions to ask. Please do keep checking APS's FAQ page. The PRC's page has some FAQs, and SEPTA's website will soon have a COVID-19 tab that you can refer to help parents through. And we will try to work with Office of Special Education to try to answer some of these questions we didn't get to. We will also post the slide presentation on our website, our Facebook page. We'll send it out to our listservs. And Kathleen, do you have anything else to add?
No, thank you guys. You guys are awesome. This is great questions coming into this. We spent a lot of time going through it to make sure your voices were heard.
Can I just say quickly, I want to thank the interpreters who stuck with us as someone like myself talking very quickly, and I appreciate that very much for being able to provide that service to our community that needs that. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I will stop recording.